It was 17 years ago at the Kinnis Shluchos, Matzah Shabbos, after the Mlava Malka program. A few of us friends were sitting together in the entire ballroom and discussing our struggles and our deliberations about giving our children chinuch al taras hakodesh.
My first years of Kinnis, I remember seeing some of my friends from after. I don't know if it was after the banquet or after Matzah Shabbos, and I was like, we really need to sit down in Farbrengen. Like, we need to have like some time where we're just talking to each other and singing and giving each other chizuk and not just listening.
We'd come together and just have like a heart-to-heart, shluchos to shluchos, friend to friend Farbrengen. We would just talk about life, talk about our children, talk about our chinuch situation, our struggles, and really inspire each other to go back home and be ready to continue our shluchos. And it was this one Farbrengen that many of us, if not all of us, cannot forget. I can't believe it's 17 years ago. It feels like maybe 8.
At the time, the Shluchim online school was not yet in existence, so the options were sending children away from home at a young age, homeschooling, or sending them to a local day school if there was one. And we were sitting there debating the different options, pitfalls, etc. of each option. One of the women that was sitting there was a woman who was a bit younger than me, yet she has not been blessed at the time with children. She was married for about 10 years and did not yet have children, and was participating in this conversation as if it was negeya to her, like the rest of us. And that was to me very inspiring, as I myself was struggling at the time with secondary infertility. I was having a hard time accepting it. As this conversation was going on to the wee hours of the night, and I saw how this woman was happy and participating in this conversation as if it was negeya to her, like to the rest of us.
At about 2-3 o'clock, we had a couple of the shluchos stood up and left, which was normal. At a certain point, people start leaving. And it was the shlucha that left actually had no children. So after she left, one of the shluchos said, was the chassidische Farbrengen kan eiftan, kemach mechal nish eiftan. Let's give the shlucha a bracha from the source of a Farbrengen, that the Rebbe should give her a bracha and she should have a child.
So she said, let's take this opportunity now where we're sitting together and say a l'chaim for this woman that she should be gebenched with children. As I was of the older ones around the table, they asked me to say the l'chaim. So I took the cup, and thinking about her, but also thinking about myself, I said that anybody who needs bracha for Zara Chaya v'Kayama should be geholfen with Zara Chaya v'Kayama.
But it was very warmed, very ungewarmt, and people were like mentioning about, I also wanted a bracha, whether, Baruch Hashem, the other shluchos did have children, but people, it was either several years or up to 6-7 years that shluchos around the table were hoping for continued brachas of more children. And the next year, I believe 3 to 5 of us shluchos, myself included, were either pregnant or already had a child by the end of this year, before the following Chaf B'Shvat.
Remember the l'chaim, of giving brachos to those who needed it. And the next year, a few people spoke again when we had another Farbrengen, how they were blessed with kids that year, and they saw the brachos, and we did the wishes again.
That year, Baruch Hashem, out of the blue, I became pregnant with my 6th child. And when I came to the Kinnis Shluchos a year later, I was very, very happy and astonished to find out that quite a few women who were present at that Farbrengen also came with newborn babies, and also that first woman who hadn't had any children for 10 years, she too was gebenched with a child. And this brought home to us very, very, very strongly the idea that what a Chassidish Farbrengen can uftan, can mach mechol nish uftan. And since then, we usually take this opportunity when we're all together to wish each other from the bottom of our hearts everything that one desires and needs. We bench each other. There should be geholfen, zarachai v'kiyama, parnasa barachava, brias nechayna, shidduchim, chassidish nachas from our children, etc., etc.
During this incredible, special time of Chaf B'Shvat, may we all be zeicha. Anybody that needs brachas for gesund, for children, for nachas, chassidish nachas, for shidduchim, may we all be gebenched with everything that we can possibly need.
L'chaim u'levracha.
Chaim Shluchos.
Tyra Shluchos. With this beautiful story and message in mind, we begin this year's Shluchos Farbrengen. This Farbrengen has been sponsored by the Skolnick family in honor of Mrs. Michal Shanowitz and his Lischas Devor Leah Bashtar Nasara. Welcome to Shluchos Farbrengen Tafshin Pei Aleph.
Okay, Middelach, Tati's unmuted. Okay. If you hear children in the background, they've been warned. Wouldn't it be ironic if I was supposed to Farbrengen about the opening lines of communication with our children, and then you hear me yelling at my kids for making noise during the Shluchos Farbrengen? Anyways, wow. Okay, Baruch Hashem. This is a big schus to have been asked to address the Shluchos. You know, I'm thinking right now that in previous years at the Shluchim office. Oh, I have hold on a second, little chat here. Oh yes, hi. Yeah, you can post anything you want in the chat. Hopefully I'll keep up with it. There are questions that I was sent ahead of time that I have in my email, but you can send stuff live in the chat and I will, hopefully I'll see it. I'll keep up with it. Anyways, as I was saying, I'm thinking about in years past, this night, you know, the Thursday night of the Kinnis in the Shluchim office, you know, in that, I guess that the big room, the big hall, and you know how they squish in all those chairs and all the shluchos smush in, and it's packed wall to wall. And now, you know, on one hand, we don't have the energy of being smushed into the room where nobody can move, but on the other hand, I see Klein Hoda 416 participants, 407 to 18. It's going up. 418 Klein Hoda participants. And I don't think even with the smushiest smushing that they fit that many shluchos into that room. So in a certain way, you know, we have our current situation has caused us to gain. Anyways, again, it's a big schluss. And of course, the 420 or 400, whatever it is, shluchos who are in this chat or this Zoom, as I'm sure you know, but I think it's kedai to repeat it. I would like you to know that when I'm speaking to, as I see now it's up to 424, when I'm speaking to whatever number it is of you, I have in mind that really I'm speaking to you and all of the people that you influence. So that means your families and your communities and everyone who looks up to you and everyone who you influence. So in that sense, this is a much bigger gathering than even whatever number it'll say down there on the bottom of the screen, you know, there where it says the participants, right? That number. Multiply that by 10. Multiply it by 100. That's how many people are really here with us. Okay. Anyways, without further ado, lines of communication. I'm going to look at the questions soon. And as I said, if you want to send in questions to the chat, it's the Farbrengen. You know, speak up, be comfortable to say whatever you want, and I will be another try to respond. But let me just start off by saying this. Whenever we talk about communication, the most important thing we have to know, before we know what's being said, we need to know who is speaking to whom. You know, when people, you know, hire me, they bring me to speak. The first question I ask, not what topic do you want me to speak on, I say, who am I speaking to? Who's my crowd? Who are these people? You know, are they your inner circle of people who are becoming close to Yiddishkeit? Are they your big crowd that you're trying to impress? Are they people who've been with you for a long time? Are they new people? Are they single? Are they married? Are they more religious, less religious, younger, older? Why? Because communication is all about who is speaking and to whom you are speaking. That's why one of my favorite things to tell people when they ask questions is I learned, not this exact phrase, I use my own words for it, but I learned from the Rebbe, specifically from the Igros, the Rebbe's style of answering questions, that you don't answer the question, you answer the questioner. There's no one right answer to a question. You know, there's the famous story about the mechanech who wrote up a Shulchan Aruch of Chinuch, brought it to the Rebbe. He wrote a list of klolim, of principles, of rules for education. And I think he had 10 of them. And the Rebbe looked it over, said, it's good. And he said, but you're missing the 11th rule. The 11th rule is that there are no rules. And I saw an Igros where the Rebbe said to somebody that there are no klolim regarding people. It was a Yiddish letter. It said there's nicht dokin klolim wegen Menschen, I believe was the Lashon. But there are so many things where, you know, you ask, what's the Rebbe's stance on this? What's the Rebbe's stance on that? If it's a policy issue, you know, something that's a public issue, like, you know, how, for instance, how a message should be structured, let's say, or something, you know, has to do with, you know, security in Eretz Yisrael, things like this of a institutional nature, or additionally concepts like in learning, like how to learn Rashi, you know, then the Rebbe will have very set rules. But when it's in Yonim Nafshim, when it's personal stuff, it's hard to pin down what the Rebbe's stance is, because every person gets their own individual answer. You know, it talks about in the Hakdama of Tanya that he mentions how hard it is to write a book that addresses everybody's needs. Alter Rebbe says in the Hakdama of Tanya that, you know, even in halacha, when we're talking about things that should seemingly be black and white, you'll have a machlekes min hakotza el hakotza, from one extreme to the other. And the Alter Rebbe there says, how much more so inner things, the hidden inner life of avavayira, of emotions. When it comes to human emotions, you can't have one set answer that is one size fits all. So what I want to start off by saying is, if we're talking about a real connection, we have to be prepared that there is no one proper way to do it. There's a story somebody told the Rebbe in Yechidus. I don't know what went wrong. I don't know what went wrong. I gave all of my children the same chinuch. The Rebbe said, you gave all of your children the same chinuch, right? So the first yesod here, the first foundational idea is you have to know who you're talking to, who's speaking and who's being spoken to. And that's gonna determine everything. So let me start by maybe inviting you to contemplate, reflect for a moment. Our children have their own personalities. They have their own will. They do what they want to do. And sometimes that's less problematic and sometimes more. And sometimes we all look back and finally remember, the quote unquote, the good old days when it was so simple, when they were babies. Babies are difficult because they cry, because they need to be changed. But, on an emotional level, babies are pretty simple, right? They can't, they can't be defiant. They can't, they can't challenge you. Whatever a baby does is just natural. And so, yeah, it's easy when they're babies. But I'll tell you something also. When they are babies and we look at them, we see them in a way that is closer to the truth. Why? Because when you look at a baby, you do not think to yourself, hey, baby, why don't you grow up, learn how to talk, we'll go out for coffee, I'll see if I like you. No, you don't say that. You don't even think it. You don't say, hey, baby, why don't you grow up, learn some skills, accomplish some things, and give me a reason to be proud of you. No, you don't say it. You don't even think it. When you look at your baby, you have unconditional pride. You're unconditionally proud, not just unconditional love. Unconditional love is something that was a chiddush maybe, 20 years ago. That was a big thing, unconditional love, right? I'm saying 20 years ago in the Welt. The Rebbe was saying unconditional love for a Jew, from day one. But I'm saying in the Welt, unconditional love was a chiddush maybe 20 years ago. But the real chiddush is not unconditional love, unconditional pride. Unconditional pride. When you look at a baby, you don't just love your baby, you're proud of your baby. What are you proud of? Your baby doesn't do anything. How can you have nachas from someone who can't do anything? And the answer is because at that point you are tuned into the truth that they don't have to do anything to be an object of pride. A father was telling me that his son was living at home. He was not in yeshiva. He wasn't working. He wasn't really doing very well. He wasn't thriving. And one day the father walked by the son's bedroom and he sees the son is in bed, like he is most of the time, And father walks in and he says to the son, don't you even want better for yourself? Now, I understand the frustration. I understand where that's coming from when the father says that. Don't you even want better for yourself? But, obviously, that's kicking a man when he's down. This bacher is not in yeshiva. He's not working. He's sleeping 18 hours a day. He's not thriving, okay? He's not thriving. And then somebody asks him, like, to twist the dagger, don't you even want better for yourself, right? Okay. So the father's telling me this, though, and he says, I come in and I say to my son, "What? Don't you even want better for yourself?" And he says, my son turns to me and he says to me, "You're never proud of me, right? You're never proud of me." Now, when a child says that to you, it's sort of like when a spouse says to you, you never thank me. What do you mean I never thank you? I thanked you 3 years ago. Remember that time, right? Okay. Anyway, so what did the father do, though? The son says, "You're never proud of me." And so what did he do? He said, "I was proud of you." And he told him, "I was proud of you a year ago when you did such and such." Now, first of all, you didn't validate his feeling. He said, "You're never proud of me." It's just a feeling. You don't have to be so medactic on the word never, right? But second of all, what you told him was even worse, because you're basically saying, right, I am never proud of you, because I have to go back a year to remember the last time I was proud of you, right? So he says, "I was proud of you a year ago." So the son had the intuition to be able to ask this question. He said, "But are you proud of me now?" And the father's telling me this story. He says, "My son asks me, 'But are you proud of me now?'" And I said, "Oh my gosh, please tell me you told him you are." He said, what is there to be proud of? He's sleeping in bed. He's 18 hours a day in bed. He's not in yeshiva. He's not working. He's not doing anything. I told him, "No, I'm not proud of you right now." I said to him, "How dare you? How dare you?" He says, "What do you mean, how dare I love him. I love him, but I'm not proud of him. I'm not proud of him." I told the father, "You taught this boy the 12 psukim?" He says, "Yeah." I said, "You taught him the 12 psukim. You taught him that Amech kulam tzadikim, that every Jew is a tzaddik. You taught him this about other Jews. You taught him this about other Jews, that Amich kulam tzadikim, that Hashem's nation is all tzadikim. Neitzimatay ma'aseh yoder lehispoer. Lehispoer. You know what the word lehispoer means? To be proud of. Hashem says about every Jew, I am proud of you. Not just Hashem loves Jews. Ahavtim, he loves them. No. Lehispoer. Hashem is proud of every Jew. Why? Not because of ani le'nivresi ela l'shamash koini. That's a second level of nachas. There is a nachas, of course, that comes from our maisim. Of course. Nachas ruach lefanai shamarti v'naser etzoini. Of course, Hashem gets nachas from our maisim. There's no question about that. But before you can have the nachas that Hashem has from our maisim, you have to remember there's a fundamental baseline nachas Hashem has from us just because we are us. Not from what we do, but from who we are. Hashem says, I'm proud of you because I made you. Not because you did anything, because I made you. You are mine, and therefore I'm unconditionally proud all the time. You know, in 91, when a certain individual in Eretz Yisrael started saying terrible things, that Chilonim in Eretz Yisrael are going to cause a second Holocaust, and all types of narishkeit, just things that are just so unintelligent. And the Rebbe finally spoke out against this individual, not for the attacks that the person launched against the Rebbe, but for speaking foolishly about Jews and in a cruel way about Jews. And it was Parshas Vayikra, and the Rebbe mentioned the Haftorah of Parshas Vayikra, where Hashem says about the Jewish people, he says that Hashem says about the Jews, Am zu yatzarti, I made this nation. I made this nation, and therefore, Tilosi Yisaperu, they will relate my praise. And the Rebbe asked, what do you mean they will relate my praise? Maybe they will, maybe they won't. Why does it say it with such certainty? Because, no, but that's the answer, because I made this nation. I formed this nation. So Hashem says, I'm proud of the Jewish people before they even do anything. And then the Rebbe starts describing how after the Holocaust, every single Jew who walks this earth is a living miracle. Every single Jew who's alive in this world, before he does even one mitzvah, just the fact that he's walking this earth is a testimony to the nitzchias of the Eibishter. And therefore the Eibishter is proud of every single Jew. So before we talk about what the message we're trying to communicate is, we have to remember who we are communicating to. Who are you communicating to? When we look at the baby and we have unconditional pride, and we don't ask the baby to prove his worthiness, we realize when we look at the baby intuitively, we are in tune with the fact that this is a neshama. It's a little neshama that just arrived in this world. And therefore, we realize that this child is intrinsically worthy, unconditionally worthy, infinitely worthy. I'll say that again. Intrinsically worthy, unconditionally worthy, infinitely worthy. What does that mean? Intrinsically worthy means their worth doesn't come from something outside of themselves. They don't have to go out and get it. Unconditionally worthy. There's nothing that can take their worth away. Their worth is absolute. And infinitely worthy. How worthy are they? Infinitely. There's no limit to the value of every single one of our children. So that's the basis. The basis is you got to know who you're talking to. When you realize that you're speaking to a chelik elikami mamish, you're speaking to a neshama that came to this world, you will have the proper awe, the proper reverence for the relationship. The fact that Hashem has entrusted us to be stewards, to be facilitators for this neshama's shluchos in the world. That's awe-inspiring. That is, it's absolutely, it's humbling to think that Hashem gave us the responsibility to take care of this neshama. A neshama, you know what a neshama is? We have a glimpse, a glimmer of what a neshama might be. And ultimately, when we look at our children as a neshama, as intrinsically worthy, unconditionally worthy, infinitely worthy, what we're really doing for them is looking at them the way the Rebbe looks at all of us. The Rebbe sees us as neshamas. The Rebbe sees us for who we really are. And that's why the Rebbe is never fooled. The Rebbe is never fooled by our shtick. No matter how low we fall, no matter what we get involved in, the Rebbe is the Yechida HaKlali, the Yechida of Am Yisrael, and is connected to the Yechida of every member of Am Yisrael. And on the level of Yechida, we are who we are. We are pure, we are pristine, we are perfect. So the Rebbe looks at all of us this way. This is the look that people lived a lifetime with that feeling of the Rebbe's holy eyes, looking at them and seeing them, truly seeing them for who they really are. We owe it to our children to give them that look, to look at them with that level of awe and pride. Okay. I'm going to get off my soapbox and I'm going to go take a look at the emails. If you want to send in anything else to the chat, you can send it to the chat. I'm going to go wander over to the emails. Let's see what we got. Okay. Where is it? Okay. First question I have here. How do you get children to listen to their parents? Talking about young children, age 6. Okay. So my first question is, what does that really mean? How do you get children to listen to their parents? What does listen mean? You mean listen or you mean obey? Because those are two very different things. You know, last summer, I think it was the summer, with Corona, I never leave the house. So it's like, I don't even know the seasons. It's like being in Florida. You know, in Florida, there's no seasons, right? I guess it was last summer. I think it was last summer. There was a whole thing about defund the police. Yeah, everyone remembers this, right? Black Lives Matter, and you know, about police brutality. And it's interesting because you know, the Rebbe speaks about what, you know, the Nevi'im talk about the times of Mashiach, that we won't need shaitrim, right? Because everyone's going to do what they ought to do. So police are sort of a necessary evil. It's not that we, you know, we're defunding them, but definitely police are like something from Gullus. You know, it's definitely a feature of Gullus. There's a major difference between parenting and policing. And when I say policing here, I don't mean literal policing like the Men in Blue. I mean, you as a parent have a role sometimes of policing. You police your child's behavior, which is very, very different than parenting. Also, sometimes, you know, there's 3 P's. I made it up, the 3 P's. Don't ask me where's the 3 P's from, because I made it up. Anyways, but there's parenting, policing, and protecting. All right. And the fact that I say that parenting is different than policing, protecting, you should understand that policing and protecting are not parenting. Although, as parents, sometimes we have to do those things. Policing is when we, you know, like the police, they pull you over for speeding. All right. Okay. You know, so sometimes we have to, you know, for their own good, we have to interfere with certain behavior that's not healthy, not productive. Okay, that's called policing. Protecting is, you know, one kid is clobbering the other kid, so you get in between them, because you can't let even if you want the one kid to learn a life lesson, he can't learn a life lesson at the expense of the other kid getting clobbered. So you get in there and you protect, right? Or a kid wants to play with a knife or run into into traffic, right? So then we protect. But none of that's parenting. It's not parenting. Okay, so what is parenting, pray tell, if it's not policing or protecting? Parenting is very simple. Parenting is a mitzvah. Vishinantum levanecha. Parenting is vishinantum levanecha. Vishinantum levanecha means to teach Torah to your children. Policing and protecting are not educational. They don't teach anyone anything. They don't teach anyone anything. Parenting is when we are transmitting values. Parenting is when we are teaching our children what to care about, right? A value means something that's important to us. So when we can teach our child to think the same things are important to him or her as are to us, that's called transmitting values, and that is parenting. That is parenting. So when you ask, how can you get a kid to listen? Well, if you mean to obey, well, you know, there are ways to enforce behavioral compliance. You know, if a kid's little enough, you pick them up and you move them physically. They're a little older, you bribe them or you threaten them. And that can be done. And I'm not even saying it's off the table, because sometimes for the sake of safety, that's what we do. But it's not parenting. Parenting is the transmission of values. Parenting is when I'm teaching my child to change what they care about, to discover that things are important that they didn't know on their own were important. And here's the thing. That process of teaching a child what to care about is one that has to be done. Well, let me ask you a question. Let me ask you a question, Shluchos. Did you ever teach anyone in your shlichus to care about something that they didn't used to care about? Did you ever educate anybody? I'm sure you did. And I'm also sure that the context in which you educated them was not where you were catching them doing the opposite of the behavior that you were trying to teach them to value. In fact, that's probably the worst time to teach somebody to value something, is when you're calling them out for doing the opposite. Because there's a protective mechanism that every human being has, even little kids and especially little kids, called basically rationalization, self-justification. So if you catch somebody, not benching, and you say, well, you know how important benching is. Look, anybody with a healthy nefesh bamis is going to tell you, no, it's not important. Well, why? Because I was just not benching. And now you're going to tell me benching's so important. What do you want me to do? Feel bad about myself? I should identify as bad? So if I really wanted to teach the value of benching, one would be a great time to teach it when there's no pressure, when I haven't just caught somebody doing the opposite, when there is no enforcement going on, when I'm just remembering right now, I was speaking to a group of a frum group, not a Lubavitcher group, and I said, you got to take a walk with your kid. I said, if you want your kid to daven mincha, don't bark at him, 5 minutes before shkia, did you daven mincha? No, go take a walk with the kid and go hang out and relax. And when there's no pressure and it's not even close to the time of mincha, talk about how beautiful it is to daven mincha. Maybe even you'll daven mincha together that day. You'll find a shul you'll go in. But even if you don't, the point is, totally out of the blue, while you're taking a walk, talk to them about mincha. And then it's really important. Then you've really conveyed it to them. But not when you're catching them 5 minutes before shkia or 5 minutes after shkia and asking them, why didn't you daven mincha, right? I said, go take a walk. So one of the fathers in the audience says, Rabbi Taub, there's 613 commandments. You're telling me I got to take 613 walks with my kid. So I said, you got it. That's right. At least 613 walks, because that's only the biblical commandments. And obviously, I'm using the word take a walk metaphorically. Some kids like to go for a drive. Some like to play catch, you throw back and forth a ball. Some, you take them shopping. Some of them you cook together in the kitchen, include them in an activity. Whatever it is that is relaxing and bonding for that child. And those are your times to teach them about what matters. So, do yourself a favor. If you're talking about in the moment, don't even try to teach, because it's not conducive to teaching. And if you can let it go and ignore it. If you can't let it go and ignore it, then I guess you're going to have to police or protect. But don't call it parenting, and don't wonder why your child didn't learn anything from it. That's the main thing. Don't wonder afterwards, why didn't they learn? I taught them. No, you didn't teach them. Policing and protecting do not teach anything. They have a goal that they achieve. They keep children safe in the moment. That's all they do. And sometimes that's what we do. But don't wonder afterwards, well, why didn't they get that value? Why? Because you didn't transmit a value. Transmission of values is something that, as you as educators all know, that happens in a relaxed context where a person is open, where a person is receptive, where there's dialogue, where a person can ask questions, when they're feeling inquisitive, not when they're feeling pressured or judged. So, maybe to answer this question again in a really short answer, I'll take everything I just said and sum it up in 10 seconds, is you want to know the best way to actually get a child to learn what you want them to learn is to pick better times and places for teaching those lessons. Okay. Question that came in. What about teaching children about Kabbalah's oil? I wouldn't teach Kabbalah's oil to our community. Should we not be teaching our kids Kabbalah's oil? Well, I don't know why you wouldn't teach Kabbalah's oil to your community. I think you can. I think you can teach it. Of course you can teach Kabbalah's oil to Mikuravim. Why wouldn't you? It's a Torah concept. They deserve to know about it. What you mean is, you don't mean I wouldn't teach Kabbalah's oil to your Mikuravim. What you mean is, I wouldn't I wouldn't act unreasonable and boss them around because they would stop coming. They would leave. But that's not teaching Kabbalah's oil. Teaching Kabbalah's oil is teaching. Teaching. So too, with your children, the same thing you wouldn't do with your community is not going to, because it wouldn't work. Same thing that you wouldn't do with your community because it wouldn't work. It's also not going to work with your kids. But the same thing that could work with both of them, and that is actually teaching it. You said teaching Kabbalah's oil. Okay, so telling somebody because I said so is not actually teaching them Kabbalah's oil. It's actually the opposite of teaching Kabbalah's oil. It's demanding that they act with Kabbalah's oil without having taught them what it is. You hear what I'm saying? Telling somebody a command they don't understand, and when they question it saying, because I said so, is not actually teaching them Kabbalah's oil. It's actually making a demand from them to act as if they have the tool of Kabbalah's oil without you having taught them. So, yeah, I understand that, Kabbalah's oil means doing things without a reason. I get it. But even that concept needs to be explained to you. You have to understand the value of doing things without a reason. You hear what I'm saying? So we're Chabad. You can't get away from the Chochmah Bin Adas. Even the idea of doing things that you don't understand has to be explained. You don't have to explain why each and everything has to be done. Right? You understand the difference? You don't have to explain why each and every command has to be done. But you do at some point during one of those walks that you take with your child, have to explain to them this idea. At some point in their chinuch, somebody has to teach them that there's a concept called Kabbalah's oil, and it means acceptance of the yoke. And you could even teach them what is a yoke, and you maybe take them to a farm and show them an animal with a yoke, and explain to them what that means. And an animal that's just running around is causing damage, but an animal that has a yoke on its back is productive, and it's an asset to the farmer, and it's actually helping to get good things accomplished. And tell them, show them the metaphor. Show it to them, explain it to them. But what I'm saying is you cannot demand from them to have a skill that you haven't taught them. So even Kabbalah's oil is something that has to be taught. And by the way, the best time to teach that lesson, like I was saying before, the best time to teach a lesson is not when you're demanding compliance with that behavior, but totally when there's no pressure, when it's just a lesson, it's just a discussion, when the stakes aren't high, when there's no ego involved, when there's no defensiveness. If the child's feeling defensive, forget about a child, even an adult. If an adult, you just caught an adult doing something wrong, that's the worst time to tell them about what they did wrong. If you really value that they should learn this lesson, here's the hardest part about parenting. Since we realize that teaching a lesson can't be done b'shas ma'aseh because the child will just be defensive. So you know what that means? This is the hardest part of it. It means you actually have to remember You have to remember, this is the hardest part. You have to remember to teach them that lesson that they didn't learn yet, which they apparently didn't learn because they're not behaving accordingly with that lesson. And you have to wait until a totally different time to teach them that lesson. Problem is, what happens? We don't even get reminded about the lesson until the misbehavior comes up and reminds us. Which, by the way, I want to mention a second thing. In addition to the fact that it's a terrible time to try to teach a lesson because the child is defensive, I want to tell you another thing. When you only teach lessons because you just were reminded of them because of bad behavior, you are implicitly sending a message that this lesson that you're about to teach is not really that important. You know how you're sending that message? Because if the lesson were so important, you would have thought of it on your own. You would have thought of it on your own. It would have come up when you're taking a walk with me and telling me about what you care about and telling me about what's important in life. See, that's what you do, Mommy. What do you do for us children? You let us know what things are important, what things we should care about. So when we were having one of those talks, that lesson should have come up when you were teaching us what's important in life. But the fact that the lesson didn't even come up until you were reminded of the idea by noticing my bad behavior, that seems to indicate to me that the lesson was not so important, it wasn't even worthy of coming up on its own. So that's why if we really, really care about something and we really want our child to know it, like you mentioned in the chat there, Kabbalah soil, if you don't all of a sudden remember that you want your child to have Kabbalah soil when his lack of Kabbalah soil is bothering you. You hear what I'm saying? Don't suddenly remember that you want your child to have Kabbalah soil because his lack of Kabbalah soil is bothering you and that reminds you, oh yeah, he should have Kabbalah soil. If you really truly value Kabbalah soil, search yourself first. If you made a list of 100 qualities that you think are important for success in life, I mean, this is a thought exercise you could do. Make a list of 100 values. You know what a value is? A value is not a thing. A value is not an object. It's an idea. It's an idea that we hold to be important. So, you know, imagine, take a paper and write 100 values. Forget about 100. I'll make it easy. Write 10. 10 values, 10 ideas that you think are important for somebody to care about in order to succeed in life. As you define it. As you define it. It doesn't have to be anyone else's list. It's only your list. And now you have to ask yourself, don't ask yourself, why don't my children have those values? Well, what do you mean, why don't they have those values? Because they weren't taught yet. Rather, ask yourself, what can I do strategically, proactively, preemptively to get ahead of the curve and to make sure that each one of my children on their own, in their own way, is taught this value? But don't teach the value b'shas ma'isa when their own bad behavior reminds you, oh yeah, I forgot, I want them to have that value. If it were really so important, it would have come up. You know, children know what we really care about. They know what we really care about. And that's why hypocrisy is so dangerous. Because they know the difference between something that we're so passionate about that we can't stop talking about it and something that we're using as a weapon to enforce behaviors that for whatever reason we decided, you know, that we want them to behave a certain way. But if it's truly something we care about, Vishinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam. You want to teach it to your child? V'dibarta bam. You got to be speaking about this stuff. You know, our children know what we care about by what we speak about. and not what we speak to them, when we're catching them misbehaving. What we Farbrengen about, what we talk about when we're taking a walk with them. What do we keep talking about? What do we think is important? The Hayemim says you have to spend a half an hour thinking about chinuch every day. There's a reason why it takes half an hour of thinking, because chinuch is not reactive; it's proactive. If it were reactive, you wouldn't have to think about it, right? If it were reactive, then I'll just wait around till my child does something wrong, and then their misbehavior will remind me of what lesson that I want to teach them, right? But that's not what we do. We're proactive. We spend a half an hour a day thinking, which means, what are the values I want my child to have? What are the values that I want myself to have? And then how can I find low pressure, warm, positive settings where we can bond and I can transmit these values? In other words, let me make it very simple, at the risk of repeating myself, but repetition is good, because I think we need to sometimes hammer ideas home. Chinuch is not about behaviors, it's about ideas. Behaviors are the outer manifestation of ideas. It's like, when people don't get the missing formula, the secret formula of your Shluchos, when they think that any old outreach worker can replicate this kind of Avos Yisrael. And they can't, because they're looking at, from the outside, a certain set of behaviors. And they want to, so we'll just imitate your programming, and then we'll have your secret formula. It don't work that way, because the behaviors didn't arise out of thin air. The behaviors, the way you act toward your Mekarov man Shluchos, is an outer manifestation of a set of values that you have. A love of the Rebbe, a love of every Jew that was taught to you by the Rebbe, a sense of mission, sense of the urgency of bringing Mashiach. These are values. And then when you have those values, then they manifest themselves as certain behaviors. But if you just try to learn the behaviors without the values that are behind those behaviors, you'll never get it. And the same thing with our children. We're not here to teach them behaviors. We're here to teach them values. The behaviors are just an indication to us of whether or not they're getting the value. Because when you learn to care about something, then you will behave in accordance with it. But we spend, I believe that we spend way too much time on chitzonius and not enough time on pnimius. We're focusing on behaviors, and we're not remembering what behaviors come from. Where do behaviors come from? Behaviors are the outermost manifestation. Our job, look, you just want behaviors, so fine, policing and protecting, because you can just enforce behavioral compliance, and your child will learn how to sin without getting caught. That's what they'll learn how to do. But if you want them to actually care about something, then we have to teach. And teaching means, again, in a low pressure, warm, non-threatening, pleasant setting, we're bonding and connecting. Talk to them. You want to teach it to your child, you got to speak about the things you care about. Okay, let's see what else we got. I think I'm running out of time too. Baruch Hashem, time flies when you're having fun. Yeah, how much time do I have left here? When are they gonna disconnect my microphone over here? Okay. Somebody will tell me. Two more minutes. Oh my goodness. Okay. Question here in the chat. But with older kids, like teens, they often reject the parents' values, being less tznius, even though we really care about it and taught them it. Okay. I'm going to say something bluntly, because I have 90 seconds. I remember once when I was writing the soul maps class, and Beryl Bell said to me something about education, about teaching how to teach, adult education, but it blew my mind. He said, "You know what you said. You know what they heard." That's all he said. Just that. You know what you said. Do you know what they heard? And I realized, that affected me on so many levels. I know what I said. Do I know what they heard? I'm not Yetzer having taught something just because I spoke about it. I need to speak about it in a way that the listener will care. Okay, now in the remaining 30 seconds that I have, how do you make care? So I'm going to tell you something. The most powerful tool, the most powerful force in chinuch is your kesher with your child. Nafshoy kshura benafshoy, the soul bond. Think about it. When your child decides that their peer group is connected to them, they take on the values of the peer group. When your child decides that they're connected to you, what does it mean connect? That you are the safest person in their life. When they feel that you are their rock, you are the source of emotional stability in life, then automatically they want to have your values. In fact, if your child feels so emotionally secure in the relationship with you, you don't even tell them that they should have your values. They will automatically emulate whatever values you are actually living and displaying. So I tell parents this all the time. If you want your child to be more aligned with your values, stop talking about your values and something to increase the connection. Increase the connection. And the connection means, by the way, what does the connection mean? Emotional stability. They feel that you are safe. They feel, let me go, it's tchilasin b'seifan b'tchilasin. Let me go back to how I started. That we need to look at our children with the Rebbe, how the Rebbe looks at every Jew, with total beaming pride. Before they did anything, they didn't even do anything, and we're looking at them and we're in awe of this neshama. And when we look at them this way, they know that we are safe harbor and they have a warm, loving home, that we are providing them safety and security and acceptance. That level of kesher is so impossible to resist. It's irresistible. And then we don't even have to talk about values. So go back to the relationship. Go back to providing them that rock solid emotional support. That is the greatest gift you can give to your child for not only their Yiddishkeit, their emotional stability, their mental stability, their social stability, their success in life. Give them that rock solid support. And how do we do it? Very simple. If you look at them, neshama, you will be in awe of them.
Hello, dear Shluchos from around the world. I'm so honored to be here with all of you today, honoring Rebbetzin Chaim Mushka. Please join in with me for this next niggin, Tzama Lecha Nafshi. Tzama Lecha Thank you.
We are honored to welcome the Hach sisters who join us tonight from around the world. Mrs. Bela Brackman will be joining us from Hyde Park, Chicago, where she has been on Shluchos at the University of Chicago for close to 20 years. Mrs. Brachi Altabay has been on Shluchos for the last 18 years in Nice, France, under the Pintons, who have been there on Shluchos for over 40 years. We are honored to have Mrs. Nuchi Zirkin, Shlucha in Hunt Valley, Maryland, and Zaldi Kunin, Shlucha to Holmby Hills, California. We welcome Mrs. Malki Korek, Shlucha to Placer County, California for 15 years, who founded the Sacramento Jewish Academy, and Mrs. Chani Goldman, Shlucha to Gainesville, Florida, where she has been serving the community and students at the University of Florida for over 20 years. Please join us in welcoming the Hach sisters as we enter a discussion on their lives on Shluchos.
Good evening, family, friends, and fellow Shluchos. Welcome to this most unique Farbrengen. My name is Nuchi Zirkin from Hunt Valley, Maryland. I know I speak on behalf of my sisters when I tell you what an honor it is to be sitting here with you on this holy day of Chaf B'Shvat. Although we're not together physically, but rather on Zoom, the energy, warmth, and love that we share seems to penetrate the airways. In a short minute, I'll introduce my sisters, and you'll have the honor of hearing each one give her own insight and perspective on their day-to-day lives, families, shluchos, and share some lessons from the life that we grew up on. These are my blood sisters that I know I can call every moment of the day and night, and we share that deep, inborn, and immutable connection. But all of us shluchos are ruchniistic sisters, and we all share an incredible bond. Just a quick look at the Knesset Shluchos picture gets you noticing the variety of different color clothing, makeup, jewelry that makes us all look so different on the outside. And yet, despite our individual and unique appearance, we're actually one and the same, connected as sister Shluchos with the same deep desire for Yiddish Hasidish and Nachas from our children, and brachais for Zara Chaya V'Kayama, working tirelessly with the same goal to bring Mashiach. Many miracles have resulted from Kinnos Farbrengen, but I can personally testify the power of one such miraculous Farbrengen. It was at the Kinnos 2 years ago. I was on the bus back from the banquet, sitting together with my younger sister Zeldi. It was freezing cold. We were exhausted, but not yet ready to trudge through the snow back to the apartment where we were staying for the weekend. We felt like we had gained so much inspiration from the Kinnos, but we needed one last boost before heading back to our respected Mekaymes HaShluchos the next morning. we joined together with a small group of other shluchos who were also headed to the coffee shop for a midnight schmooze in Farbrengen. We sat at a small table with our lattes, because what else do 21st century shluchos make l'chaim on? We reviewed everything we had heard over the past few days in the workshops, lectures, and most importantly, what we heard from other shluchos. We each spoke of our deepest desires and bakashos, including a few who were desperate for a bracha for a child. We poured our hearts out until the wee hours of the morning. We connected to each other, inspired each other, benched each other, and took upon ourselves a group achlata. We kept to that achlata and the inspiration of the Farbrengen and davened continuously for one another when we returned. Within 12 months, with the Rebbe's brachos, 4 shluchos present were benched with a healthy baby, and just tonight I heard that the other is expecting her first. Before we start, I'm asking everyone to raise your glasses and wish each other to be benched with Bane, Chaye, Mezayne, Kulam Biraviche, with Chasidische Nachas from our children, good Shidduchim, complete health, Parnasa Barachava, and all our heart's desires. All the brachos should be b'tayv hanirva nigla lamata me'asar tfachim. V'ayid v'hu ha'ikar, there should be an end to all the suffering, and we should be zeiche to be reunited with the Rebbe and Rebbetzin with Mashiach now. We also feel honored that this Farbrengen is sponsored by the Skolnick family in honor of Michla Shanowitz, Shlucha in Hyde Park, Illinois, a close family friend. Together with her husband, they've been a great inspiration to our family and to many others around the world. Mrs. Shanowitz, thank you for this opportunity. And now back to my sisters. Please raise your hand when I mention your name. Connie Goldman from Gainesville, Florida. Ayla Brackman from Hyde Park, Illinois. Brachi Altabay from Nice, France. Malki Karik from Roseville, California. Then comes me. And last, but definitely not least, Zeldy Kunin from Westwood, California. The first one that's going to share is my sister Malki. Malki and her husband have been on Shluchos in Placer County in Northern California for over 15 years. As her oldest was reaching the age of kindergarten, she was adamant that her children attend an in-person school, but the closest option was 6 hours away driving. So they set out to start their own school. Sacramento Jewish Academy has Baruch Hashem grown to 65 children with both shluchim and local children in attendance. Malki.
Thank you, Nochi, for the heartfelt introduction. Welcome to the Farbrengen around the table with the Hecht sisters. It's our first time sharing with you, but we've been together many times around the Hecht table as children. I'd like to bring you back to the Hecht table of our youth and give you a glimpse into our home where we grew up. The reason why I choose to share all of this with you is because it is these memories, this passion, this upbringing that formed me into who I am today as a woman, a mother, and a shlucha. What you'll hear are some of the precious memories that I carry with me from my childhood. I truly believe that these unscripted, organic events have molded much of who I am and aspire to be today. Chinuch is the cornerstone of our shluchos and our life. I am certain that there is nothing that matters as much to each and every one of us as does our children and their growing up as Hasidim. I often think about what the best practices for successful chinuch are. Some ideas Rabbi Taub just shared. What are the do's and what are the don't do's? What should I say to my child and what should I not say? And the list goes on. But I have come to realize that the answers to biggest questions and the way we raise our children and help shape their lives is a continuation and a reflection of the chinuch that we received as children. And in our lives as wives, mothers, and shluchos, we embody everything we were taught and how we were raised. Surely, each of us have memories of our own. And when we reflect upon them, we may find that more often than not, it is the experiences that we have chanced upon that may have the deepest and greatest impact on our lives, more so than any classes from our teachers, lectures from our parents, or the like. I hope you will find inspiration from some of these experiences that I was fortunate to witness and experience as a child. I was 8 years old. Rabbi Shmuel David Reichik and Rabbi Mendel Futterfass were in Chicago on their fundraising trips. On one of their fundraising trips. Having elder Hasidim stay with us was common in our home, and I can reflect now how I observed them then. My parents hosted a Malava Malka Farbrengen in our home for the Anash community, and I was in the kitchen listening while soaking in the Nagunim and the atmosphere. At some point, Rabbi Reichik needed to wash Negelwasser, and he came into the kitchen. He was elderly and frail. His hands were visibly shaking, but I could clearly see how he was careful to pour the water generously over each of his hands. And more than everything else from that Farbrengen, that is the moment that stayed with me. This demus of a chassid meticulously performing a mitzvah. It was this unscripted moment that made an everlasting impression on me, the preciousness of each and every mitzvah. And these experiences and moments permeated so many different aspects of my childhood. Though I was very young, I was privileged to have opportunities to visit the Rebbe, to receive dollars, a kuntris, and shake the Rebbe's lulav and esrog. For those living in Crown Heights, this may have been frequent, but for my siblings and I living out of town, this was only possible because our parents made it an absolute priority. The moment my father heard that the Rebbe was giving out a kuntris or a sefer, he was on the next airplane to New York. We lived in Chicago, and yes, it may have been a quick trip, but it was a 2-hour flight each way. We had a rotation system so that we could each have a chance to go. I will share with you a few of these incidences that I recall fondly. The story we refer to as the longest trip home from the foot doctor. One afternoon, my father received a call from Rabbi Daniel Moskowitz, Alav Shalom, the head shliach to Chicago, that the Rebbe was giving out Tanyas. My father wanted my mother to get one as she had recently resolved to learn Tanya every day. The issue was, my mother was at the foot doctor with three of my siblings, and she'd need to leave straight from there to get to New York on time. Another issue was, she didn't have enough cash to purchase the plane tickets. Remember, in those days, there was no Cash App, Zelle, or Venmo, just plain dollar bills. So she borrowed cash from the foot doctor and went straight to the airport with 2 kids in tow and a baby in her arms. On another occasion, my father was out shopping with my brother and received the much anticipated call that the Rebbe was giving out Kontresim. Naturally, they went straight to the airport, and they were the last people online to receive a kuntris that day. I too was zeichet to have such a trip. The day seemed to be a regular one. I came home from school as usual to find that my mother had a bag packed for me. The Rebbe is giving out a kuntris today, and you're going to New York. She handed me shliach mitzvah gelt, and within the next 5 minutes, a taxi pulled up. I went with Rabbi Hertz to the airport, where we met my father, who had gone there directly from work. He bought tickets for all of us at the counter, and we flew to the Rebbe, a night that will forever remain embedded in my mind. It was these unscripted moments that made an everlasting impression on me, impacting me in the way that shaped my life and inspiring me to invest every effort, physical and financial, to connect every yid that I would encounter to connect that yid to the Rebbe. These moments continue to be part of our home and our family life after Gimel Tammuz. An older chassid, Rabbi Veshetsky, used to come to Chicago to fundraise for Hadara Torah. I was 11 years old, and it was not long after Gimel Tammuz. I recall coming downstairs in the middle of the night, just for a drink of water. And from the corner of my eye, I see Rabbi Veshetsky. I look up. He is completely immersed in thought. He didn't notice me at all. His attention was somewhere else entirely. He was sitting and gazing at the cover of a Kfar Chabad magazine, which was a large picture of the Rebbe. Tears were streaming down his face. It was that unscripted moment that made an everlasting impression on me. This image of a chassid and his deep connection with the Rebbe. It was not only our trips to the Rebbe or visits of Eltereh Chassidim that affected me and shaped who I am today. My home was infused with the Hasidic Avir, and every Hayra'ah of the Rebbe was immediately implemented and put into action by our parents. Some of these that I clearly remember are when the Rebbe came out with the mitzvah of learning Rambam. My father initiated Dial a Rambam. Now, it wasn't simple to run a dial class then. There wasn't Zoom, and there wasn't even internet. So my father had to switch the tapes every day in the old-fashioned tape recorder placed in my brother's bedroom. And I have vivid memories of the recording going off in his room each time somebody dialed in. Learning Rambam and learning the Rebbe's Torahs overall was an integral part of my childhood. And the love for learning is something that I strive to pass on to my children. Another powerful memory related to the Rebbe's Hayra'os is after the Rebbe established Koilot Teferes Sekenim Levi Yitzchak to teach Torah to the elderly, my parents established a class at a nearby retirement home. I vividly recall schlepping with my mother in the middle of homework hour or whatever was going on at home to teach the class. And later, when I was in high school, I got to be a sub, filling in for my mother by giving the class myself. But the cornerstone of my home and childhood has always been focused on our education. My parents were involved in founding and building every Chabad school in Chicago. My oldest two sisters were the first graduating class of both the Cheder Elementary and Lubavitch Girls High School. And not only were they part of the group that built the schools from scratch, they continue to nurture every aspect of these maistais. One day, my sister came home from school sounding agitated. Ma, there's a girl in the other class who is having a terrible time where she's boarding. She really needs to move. Also, her father recently passed away, and it's just too much that she's going through. Ma, could she please stay here? Well, we already had 5 boarders and 13 kids in our home, but my mother didn't blink. The next day, my sister and her friend were rolling in suitcases as that girl moved into our home and became part of our family until this very day. It was this unscripted moment that made an everlasting impression on me. True Ahavas Yisrael. When there is room in the heart, there is room in the home. The last story I'm going to share happened shortly after I was newly married. With my new husband, we were on our way back to the airport to catch a flight back to New York for the remainder of our Sheva Brachas. We stopped at my childhood home to pick up a few things. As we were about to leave, my father came running down the stairs clutching something. Here is a nickel of yours that you got from the Rebbe. Here, I was about to formally leave my parents' home. My father wasn't actively trying to give me a message or to make a statement, but this was his natural implication to me. What he wanted us to go with, what he wanted us to take along with us as we began our new life together. He wanted us to take the Rebbe's bracha. I don't carry that nickel around with me, but I always carry it in my heart. Wherever I go, whatever pa'ula I am doing, I reflect on bringing the Rebbe's bracha with me. What is most unique about each of these moments is that they were not planned. Nobody was trying to make an impression on me or teach me a lesson. None of these things was out of character or dramatic. They were values of real Hasidim that my parents have and have always expressed in the way they raised our family and in the way that they live. We all know that our children hear everything that we say, and they hear everything that we don't say. They see everything that we do, and they see everything that we don't do. I hope and I daven that I too have the zchus to impart to my children these essential values as they have been imparted to me. I know that these values will not be given over by what I say or what parenting methods I may choose to use. The most powerful and important moments that will leave an everlasting impression on a child are those that are unscripted, deep-rooted, emistic, and a reflection of pure joy and true love. Thank you. My sister Nochi is supposed to be coming back on to introduce my next sister.
Thank you very much, Malky. Everything she said, I remember, and like I can't believe you expressed it so well. I can't say it better myself. And now, Brachi, I have no idea what time it is. I just know it's the middle of the night. Brachi and her family have been in Shluchos in Nice, France for the past 18 years, Baruch Hashem. And I don't want to spoil her speech, so I'm not going to give her any other introduction. Brachi.
Everyone, middle of the night. Phone with my sisters, with my mother, and I'll share what I have to say with you. I grew up always wanting to go on Shluchos. And thanks to my parents, they should live and be well, and my chinuch that I got in Chicago, that is what I am today. So I always had this discussion with one of the girls in my class. I said I wanted to go far on Shluchos, and she said she wanted to go far from Yiddishkeit. So today, my friend Miriam Esther, I don't know if you're here, is on Shluchos in Nashville, Tennessee, running a school. I'm sure she's running lots of other things. And I'm the farthest away from my family in Nice, France. I could have ended up further in Australia, in Antarctica, but France is pretty far. Mentality-wise, welcome to the world of Farbrengen. I did not or there's a big difference between Tunisians and Moroccans. Welcome to the world of Farbrengen. The language, when I came, I couldn't speak one word in French. I couldn't even say comment ça va. Baruch Hashem today, after 18 years on Shluchos, I can. And the climate on the ocean and sunny in the winter. I came pretty far than the cold, but very warm Hasidic Chicago, that I left 20 years ago. So Baruch Hashem, the language I learned fast. And we came to grounds. Since here over 40 years, they should live and be well, started a school and is flourishing with over 250 children today. Mrs. Pinson welcomed me as her daughter. And as more of her children got married, they came to join us. They came back on Shluchos, and many more Shluchim. To traditional, to Litvish, to Lubavitch, all in one school, and really hats off to Mrs. Pinson. It's called the school that everyone loves. Every year. So I'm going to tell you what I do on my Shluchos. Every year it changes. When we first came, I was in in kindergarten. That helped me learn the language. And then 6 months I was on Shluchos. Mrs. Pinson said to me, when I was here 6 months, I started giving women's classes. I sat down, I prepared word for word with my husband, and that's how I learned that's what you're going to do. So that's what I did. I started teaching classes, a lot of one-on-one with students who were happy to fill in the missing words. For some time, I gave the Shabbos shir in different women's homes. And then Baruch Hashem, my first child was born in our 4th year of marriage. So life changed, Baruch Hashem. I continued the one-on-one classes more and sometimes less. And that is what I'd like to today. I prepared that the Frierdiker Rebbe actually said this sikha when he visited Milwaukee. I actually didn't even know that the Frierdiker Rebbe visited Milwaukee in Tafshin Beis. That's actually where my mother's from. And now there are two types, and this is what it said. There are two types of laws. Laws that generate life and laws that are as a result from life. Human created result because Tyra is MS. MS beginning to end. Tyra is eternal. Tyra and Chassidus are the greatest gifts we have and the greatest gift we can give to ourselves and to our children. To ourselves, to our children, and to our communities.
Rachi, if it's getting a little choppy, if you don't mind, log out and then log back in. In the meantime, I'm going to move on to Bela.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Joys
of Zoom Farbrengens. Bela and her family run the Chabad House and Community at the University of Chicago in Hyde Park. They've been living there for close to 20 years, Baruch Hashem, spreading Torah and Yiddishkeit to the south side of Chicago and beyond. Bela, go ahead.
Thank you. First of all, l'chaim Shluchos, l'chaim Michla Shanowitz on your Farbrengen. You have been a tremendous source of inspiration for me on my Shluchos and to all of the Chicago Shluchos for which and to my dear sisters-in-law who are on the Farbrengen tonight. You guys are all extraordinary Shluchos yourself. And wish you could be up here with us, Farbrengen, and of course, l'chaim to my mother, who's on the Farbrengen tonight, l'chaim der Shluchos. Welcome, Shluchos. What an honor to be here with my sister Shluchos, my dear sisters, an incredibly powerful group of women sharing together and Farbrengen. Baruch Hashem, I've been in my Makom HaShluchos in Hyde Park, Chicago, at the University of Chicago for close to 20 years. We feel blessed to live here, servicing the highly academic, intellectual, and liberal community, which obviously comes with its fun times and challenges like every Chabad house around the world. Today, I am going to share with you some inspiration from our dear Rebbe, how to plow ahead, never give up, stay positive and focused. anything, any thoughts stop us from doing the work that we are sent to do. In a letter from Igros Kodesh, Chelik Yud Beis, Dalet Tishrei, Tafshin Tes Zayin, the Rebbe responds to a man who wrote about his concerns of his accomplishments with working with the youth. He was telling the Rebbe that he feels he was not seeing results in his pe'ulais, and it was causing him doubts. The Rebbe wrote that negative feelings and lack of enthusiasm can be damaging. Or the contrary, if you feel fully accomplished, then your Yetzer Hara feels that you have completed your mission completely. We have no idea what or when our efforts will be fulfilled. We have to plow ahead. Perhaps when our youth are grown and have families, they will feel more settled and be reminded of the time with you, and it will tip the scale for the positive. The Rebbe of his work, but ultimately those Talmidim passed away, and there were 5 remaining students that spread Torah. Could you imagine? 5 students, that was it. Although it may seem as Rabbi Akiva didn't have Hatzlacha initially, his 5 students managed to disseminate Torah, the Torah in which we learn today. The Rebbe continues with telling this man not to compromise Torah with the youth, teach them the emes, and even though we can't transform a Talmud overnight, slowly but surely, step by step, we will influence them. We must use all of our energy and never give up, never feel weakened, because the Devarim hayetzim min halev nichnasim el halev. If we teach it and give it to them from our hearts, it will enter into their hearts. In conclusion, the Rebbe reminds this fellow to share his happiness and accomplishments with increased energy by giving the Rebbe nachas and letting him know the peiros that he had planted and sown. This incredibly, as shluchos, we sometimes find ourselves having these thoughts. What are we accomplishing? How can I be poil on another person? Did my talk or program change someone? Does living out in this far place really make a difference? The words from the Rebbe, as I mentioned above, remind us that each and every one of us has a tremendous koyach, and coupled with the brachos of our Mishaleach, we will be poil. And even if we don't see results right away, something has changed in the neshama of every single yid that we come across. A few years ago, I got an email from a woman who was in Chicago at the University of Chicago living with her boyfriend. She wanted to talk to me, she wanted to have coffee, and she wanted a place to eat on Rosh Hashanah. We met, and she told me she had very little Jewish knowledge, and sadly, she was living with her non-Jewish boyfriend at the time. But she told me that she lights Shabbos candles every single week. I was incredibly amused. She said that many years earlier, she attended a release time program, urged her to light Shabbos candles. She was lighting them every single week. Not only was she lighting them, but she convinced her mother and her grandmother to light Shabbos candles. And they never forget to light Shabbos candles. I found out that this young girl, today a woman, her name is Mushki Edelman Nee Avzin. We have never met. I am sure she had no idea at that time of the long-term effects she would have from her release time program. The candle of Shabbos burns in multiple homes today because of a young Beis Rifka girl spending a few hours on Mitzvayim. A girl once showed up at my Chabad house. She popped in on a Friday night because she was new in town, and she heard some students in front of her who said that they were going to Chabad. With nothing else to do, she followed them and joined. Being that she was new, I spent a little extra time with her. We sat and talked for a while. She told me about her Muslim boyfriend. She told me about her liberal views. And she told me that she intended to get to know every cultural experience as a graduate student. I wondered how I would make a difference on this neshama. After Shabbos, I reached out to her and asked her to come the following Shabbos, and the following Shabbos, and the following Shabbos. And she came the entire year. Baruch Hashem, at the end of the year, she gave up her boyfriend, went to Mayanot Yeshiva, and today lives with her beautiful frum family in Silver Spring, Maryland, a family that we call part of our family. A boy showed up with his friend to join us for Tashlich. It was his first time. He had no formal Jewish education, And I think he came because he thought it sounded kind of cool and strange at the same time. On the walk to Tashlich, I asked him if he would join us for Yom Kippur. He was reluctant and said he didn't do Jewish holidays. So I thought I would push my luck, and I asked him, well, if you won't join us for Yom Kippur, perhaps you'll fast on Yom Kippur. He was adamant that I had crossed the line, I said too much, and that he was an athlete, and he needed to have his protein and carbohydrates every single day. I had our break fast that year after Yom Kippur. Nathaniel walked in. I couldn't believe it. I said, Nathaniel, what's going on? How's everything? He didn't want to talk. He was too hungry. All he wanted was food. He thought about our conversation and he realized that he actually can do it. He was able to fast on Yom Kippur. Every year before Yom Kippur, I sent him a text and I say, Nathaniel, hope you are well. Wishing you an easy fast. You are my Yom Kippur inspiration. This year again, I sent him a text before Yom Kippur. Nathaniel, I'm thinking about you. You are my Yom Kippur inspiration. He messaged back with a smiley emoji face and said, thanks for thinking about you. Hope your family is well. I love these Jewish kids. They're great. Sometimes though, we don't see results right away. At a Shabbos Kiddush in the beginning of the year, outside, if I can stay after everybody left because she wanted to talk to me. We talked for a long time. At the end of our conversation, she told me that she was dating a non-Jewish boy and she wanted to get it off her chest. She finally wanted me to know and it would make her feel better. We talked for a while. I was completely heartbroken. I told her how I feel, but in a gentle way so that we wouldn't lose contact, and I went home. When I walked into the house, I couldn't control myself. I saw my husband and children sitting on the couch and I just burst out crying. They were worried and said, is everything okay? I said, no, Sarah is dating a non-Jewish boy. My husband turned to me and he said, Bela, why are you crying now? She needed to see your tears. So the next Shabbos, Baruch Hashem, we celebrated the Shabbos Kala of our dear daughter Musi. Outside in the same Corona tent, socially distant with our masks and individual little kits that we gave out to each woman that came. I turned to Musi and I said, I want to speak to you from my heart as a mother marrying off a child, and I invite all of you gathered here to listen to what I am going to say. I turned to Musi and I said, it's extremely emotional for me marrying off my oldest child and how proud I am that you're continuing the chain of Judaism, going to mikvah as a woman. And I explained to the women there a little bit about mikvah. And then I turned to Sarah. I looked at her and I said, the way we have Jewish continuity is by marrying someone Jewish. She knew what I meant and I knew what she meant. She didn't say a word to me, but I daven to Hashem every day and I won't give up. She's part of my family. She's a sister. She's a student in our Chabad house, and I am confident that Hashem will guide her in the right path at the right time. We have a student that was going through hard times. She lost a father, a brother, and she gave up Yiddishkeit for a while. She called me before Yom Kippur and asked me if she can bring her dog, her therapy dog, to Kol Nidre. She explained that she does students in Chabad house. It was busy before the fast, and I turned to my husband and I said, can she bring her dog to Kol Nidre? Without hesitation, he said, yes. Dog came to Kol Nidre with her. He sat quietly. It was perfect. She fasted for the first time in many years, and also came to the break fast, which was quite nice because her dog ate lots of food from the floor and helped the cleanup and made things a little easier. After everybody left and it was quiet, I turned to my husband and I said, tell me, why didn't you hesitate when I asked you if she could bring her dog to Kol Nidre? To which he responded that he remembered a time when Rabbi Moskowitz, the head shliach in Illinois, Olav Shalom, told him that there was a student, a bacher who he was trying, about Shuva, he was trying to get into yeshiva in Kfar Chabad. And the student, this boy only wanted to go if he would take his dog with him. And Rabbi Moskowitz was adamant that he would find a way to get this boy to yeshiva along with his dog so that he could gain some Yiddishkeit. One year, we had a graduate student. After learning quite a bit, he realized that he was the firstborn son and he had never had a pidyon haben. He now lives, and so we made him this beautiful pidyon haben. We invited Rab Silverberg and his family from Chicago to come to our neighborhood and perform the pidyon haben as he is a kohen. We had lots of food. It was a tremendous celebration. Now, Baruch Hashem, he lives with his wife in Santa Fe, and he's connected with a shluchim there, the Levertovs. And a few months ago, we were invited to a Zoom event at the pidyon haben of his son. It was incredible to see the next generation, but not just that. At the end of the pidyon haben of his son, he invited his father, who was with him, to have a pidyon haben as well. So we never thought when he was at the University of Chicago that not only would we celebrate his pidyon haben at age 26, not only was it the first pidyon haben here, but probably the first of a 26-year-old, but we celebrated together with him his firstborn son and his father. When we first moved to Hyde Park, one of the first weeks we were here, we called from a young chas from Bar Parker Lakewood, I remember. He told us that he had just completed his week of Sheva Brachas, and unfortunately his wife was diagnosed with a terrible illness, and she was told that the doctor that she needs to see is at the University of Chicago. He asked us if he can stay with us. Now, we had just moved. I had 2 little kids. We were in a tiny apartment. I didn't hesitate, and I said, sure, stay with us. I have since learned that when you have people stay with you, you should probably find out a little about them and make sure everything is safe. But I was excited then, young and naive, and I had no questions to ask. He came to stay with us, and after a few days, he left. We lost touch with him. I also learned since then that you keep a database, that you stay in touch with people, but I was so new and young and just happy to be fulfilling my shluchos. One thing that we knew, that this was one of the first weeks we were here, and we already had a visitor for the hospital, that when one day, please God, we would have our Chabad house, we would make a hospitality suite in which we would allow us to have people stay for free and be taken care of if they about 6 years ago, we were at the campus kinnos, which we tried to attend each year. And there was a program there that the campus kinnos administration had brought out a few men who had created this board game, which teaches both business and organizational skills. And so we played this, the women on one side, the men on the other side. And when the game was over, he asked the shliach near him if the Brackmans are at the event. So the shliach introduced him to us, and he turned to us and he said, "You probably don't remember me, but about 12 or 13 years ago, I stayed with you when you first moved to Hyde Park when my wife was sick." And of course, we remembered him, and we told him that we knew that at that point, we would have to build a hospitality suite. He told us that sadly, his wife passed away soon after, but Baruch Hashem, he just got remarried and was expecting his first child. He has since had more than one, and we are trying to be back in touch with him. So at that point, we said to him that in which we can host people who come to the hospital with Baruch Hashem. Baruch Hashem, we have hosted many, many people. We just had a family staying with us from Williamsburg. A woman was having a heart transplant, and Baruch Hashem, they've been here for about 6 weeks. Baruch Hashem, just this week, she got out finally from the hospital, and may Hashem give Yehudas Bluma, Bas Esther, a continued refuah shalema b'karv mamish. There are so many stories that we could farbrengen all night. I do need to give my sisters a chance as well. But I would like to conclude with an interesting experience that I had a few years ago at an in-person kinnos hashluchos. One of the highlights of the kinnos hashluchos for me is renting a basement and hanging out with my sisters, staying up late and catching up on lots of things. Of course, being inspired at Farbrengens is a highlight as well. So Friday night that year, me and my sister Zelda decided that we would go to hear bracha. Our sister Farbrengen. Firstly, she's amazing. This is what sisters do. We support one another. The only issue was, as you saw before, she's a shluch in France, and her Farbrengen was going to be completely in French. But we decided we were going to go regardless of the language. Women were having a great time. They were singing, they were listening to every word, they were asking questions, they were sharing with one another. We had no idea what was going on. We couldn't follow even the basics. One thing we understood were a few simple words. Rebbe, Mashiach, Hiskashrus, Geula, Shluchos, Beulas. We needed nothing else. We got the point. It was a great experience, one that I simply can't explain. I learned that sometimes in life we understand things and sometimes we don't understand things. Sometimes we see results and sometimes we don't. But we have to plow ahead. We have to work incredibly hard, even if we have no idea what we are accomplishing. One Geula, Mitzayim, Beula, Shluchos, Mashiach. That was the basic thing. That's all I understood from the whole Farbrengen. We have a mission and we need to work and plow ahead. We need to trust that every day we are fulfilling our mission.